Call to order. Do you mind closing the door, Commissioner? Let you be the doorkeeper. We're just going to close the door and I was just going to get you to do it. But thank you. That's your job description, I know. uh, Thank you so much. If the meeting will now come to order, and we have 3 members that are zooming in. If you members would like to say something before we get started, please go ahead. Are y'all there? Okay. Well, they're all muted. Okay, thank you. We have Representative Gilliard, Representative Bonner, and Representative Corbin all doing Zoom. So we do have a quorum. And first of all, I'd like to ask Representative Matt Jackson to say a word of prayer. Does everybody have a tracking sheet? First, we've got Public Service Commission, Commissioner Eden. I think you're supposed to be ready. Where do you want to go? It doesn't matter to go. Right, that's better, I think.
How's everybody today?
Fine, thank you.
Like Gary Black over there. Be kind of Gary as long as it doesn't come out of my budget. First of all, the Public Service Commission thanks all the members of this subcommittee, the chairwoman and House Appropriations Committee, and the General Assembly and the staff as a whole for the time and attention you've given our budget. The decisions made by you and Governor Kemp in the past quite simply saved Georgia from a potential disaster. As for the PSC, we are running a smooth operation with a lean budget. Our one request, as we discussed a few weeks ago, revolves around you were very kind to throw $35,000 into the amendment budget, but we do have this ongoing federal lawsuit. And our attorney, Mr. Brian Tyson, estimates that for fiscal year 2022 that the legal fees would be around $100,000. To continue with that lawsuit. It's gone into more expensive discovery and expert witness phase of the lawsuit. Per my conversation with the governor's office, the cost of these lawsuits are delegated to the agency. In fact, since it's a lawsuit against our districts, we were determined to be the agency affected. Our budget is a relatively small one. We run a tight operation. Anything we can do to help defray the cost of the lawsuit is greatly appreciated. And the remainder of the presentation remains the same as it was in the previous meeting, with the exception of losing another employee who passed away last month. Rather than read it all through again, I'm here to answer any questions. The information's in your folders. Any questions you may have, I'm happy to answer.
Question. This money, the $100,000, will you have to pay it up front, or will it be throughout the whole year?
It would be throughout the entire year as Mr. Tyson invoices us for expenses. It first goes to the Attorney General's office and then they turn around and invoice us.
All right, so it's not all at one time. We would have to amend the budget, put some in if we could not put it all in one time.
That's true. I mean, I spoke with Mr. Tyson last week, and of course, it's a round estimate. He felt that there's probably $100,000 there for fiscal year 2020.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee members? Any questions from the people who are Zooming? Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for the job you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Department of Economic Development, Commissioner Wilson. Thank you so much for coming, Commissioner. And also, I don't want to forget to tell you, thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you, Chairman. I was saying we can't thank you enough for your support. You and the committee have always been very supportive of what was done. And really, we are just marketing the climate that you guys have created in the state of Georgia. We really appreciate it. So this is easy. I don't have a lot to discuss today, because our budget is really about as simple as it's been in a long time. We don't have any ads other than Todd Gross and the Georgia Historical Society getting a small ad in the budget. That's passed through for us. And so for the agency itself, we don't have any ads or subtraction. I just wanted to come here today to say thanks, really, and let you know how appreciative we are of your support. We had a great announcement this morning. Microsoft announced that they are investing heavily in Georgia. And with the governor and the mayor this morning, they purchased a 90-acre campus right here on the outside of Atlanta. And so what's great about this is we have done such a terrific job in this state of creating a pipeline of amazing talent. We've set that talent all over the country for the last 20 or 30 years. We get to keep those smart Georgians home right now. And that's really exciting to me. So it's transformational for the state, but it really keeps our best and brightest here at home. But the story that I want us to relate to the committee is that there are great things going on all over the state right now. This week, I've been in Savannah, and in Jessup, and in Dunlap. Three communities that are really doing things the right way. But they're great examples of really what's going on in every corner of the state. And you're seeing communities focused on workforce development, site development, and really working together for job growth. And I think that's exciting. It gives us a great narrative to continue to sell across the country and across the world. So, Chairman Houston, I'll turn it back over to you, but that's all I have to say today.
Don't have any questions. Now, I've got one question I forgot to ask Commissioner Keaton this, but we're going to ask everybody. This past year, we had so many people working at home, and so many people have reduced space. Did you have some people working at home? Do you still need the same amount of office space that you've always had, or would some people continue to be working from home?
I anticipate that we're going to bring people back, and we have. I think that I give my team a lot of credit. I think we have continued to sell the state and maximize resources from home offices. We have slowly been bringing people back on an as-needed basis to continue to do their jobs. I think you're going to see more flexibility, but I do believe that we lose a lot when we don't have people in the office. I think you're going to see us continue to need our footprint that we currently have. But it may not be exactly the same layout. It may not be exactly the same view or max capacity already. So I feel like we're going to bring people back slowly and it's safe. But Chairman, I believe we're going to need that space.
Any further questions? One other thing too, there's a talk that y'all might need some new project managers. That's just been floating around. You can get a lot of things together. Is that true?
I tell you, Chairman, I was just talking with the governor this morning. We have more opportunity now. Our project pipeline is bigger than it's ever been. I've got very junior project managers working 1,000 job projects right now. I could definitely do field and work these projects better if we had that would be fantastic. That would be an opportunity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let me ask you something. What about the rural development program? I know we had something in the budget. I think it might have been in the One Georgia money for I can't remember the title of it. Can you give us a little update on that?
Well, the rural development program, Chairman, is the governor announced that Brian Marlowe is going to be heading up that program.
Yes.
I'm working with Brian to he's hiring up the staff, and we're working with the governor to really nail down the kind of the long-term goals of the program. But it's moving, and I'm excited about the opportunities. I think what you're going to see is Brian's going to be working to coordinate what we're all doing. There are so many different bodies that are trying to increase and really increase opportunity in our rural communities right now. I think there's a real need for somebody to make sure there's not duplication effort. I think Brian is the right person for that. And then from our perspective, there are times where we need somebody to really go in and help get the project. Brian that piece as well. But I'm happy to sit down with you as we go through this process and we want to give these forward.
Well, I know Brian has done a wonderful job for Tifton and Tift County.
That's right. And we worked with him for a number of years. I'm excited about the opportunity for all of us.
Well, any other questions? Thank you, and thank you.
Doesn't have anything to say. Okay. Thank you all.
You didn't have anything to say? Thank you. World Congress Center.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to be before you today. It's a privilege to present to this committee and talk about activities at the Congress Center. In front of you is a packet of information that we had prepared for you to look at. And I'll go real quickly to it through the material as I get towards the back end, because it's really the principal focus of our ask today. We want to give you an overview of the economic impact that the Congress Center continues to have on the state of Georgia. Review of our current status on capital projects that the General Assembly has supported us on in the past. We focus more on what's the outlook. The pandemic has certainly affected all industries in its initial phases, but certainly the hospitality industry, convention trade show industry has been severely impacted. Starting in March of last year, and I'll get into that in just a moment. And then talk to you some about some updates on our financial picture as it stands today, and then our legislative request at the end. So if you flip over to page 4 in the packet, this gives you a look at fiscal 2019 and actually where we're at in fiscal 20. So still somewhat of a robust impact prior to the pandemic, which hit us in mid-March of 2020. So you can see the number differences and its effect. 500 plus events were hosted on our campus in fiscal 2019. That was cut by more than half in fiscal 20. And we did all those events really in the first 9 months of our fiscal year. Our visitor impact is displayed. Jobs that we supported obviously was a big impact on the backside of that fiscal year. Our sales tax generated, which is not inclusive of the transportation tax, so that this is associated with room tax that are but still had a somewhat significant financial impact on the state of Georgia to the tune of $1.3 billion. The investments in the facility on page 5, really, we've shown you this slide before. We still think we're a significant positive investment for the state of Georgia, and I think that's evidenced by your continued capital funding support for
certain projects across our campus. If you go to the section of the presentation dealing with just the current status of projects, we'll touch on the hotel, pedestrian mall transportation depot, orange deck, and then the roof replacement, which is really one of our continued asks for phase 2 associated with that. The hotel project, we were actually, if we were to step back in time, about this point last year, we were getting ready to market bonds, the revenue bonds to support the hotel. And the market cratered on us in mid-March. So we basically used the time from that point to now to refine the design, continue to. Yes, ma'am. Surely. Oh, that's all right. Test. Test. Is that better? There you go. Oh, no problem. No problem. It's certainly on everyone to be able to hear. All right. Okay. All right. So back to the hotel project. So sort of fast forward to where we're at today. The financial markets have definitely improved significantly for the high yield bond market, which we would be in that space with the hotel. Interest rate credit spreads last year, we could not have funded the project. So they have improved to the point that we can fund it today. So we are on the path to secure our Standard & Poor's rating on the revenue bonds in about 2 weeks. We expect those to come in at a BBB minus and a BB on the supportive bonds, which is consistent with the material that we had shared with the governor and various individuals last year as we were going through that process. Our GMP pricing is holding firm. We'll see probably a little bit of an increase in some of the materials, but it's still going to be around $308 million as far as our costs, and that's the contractor's GMP for the project. So if all works well, we'll be selling bonds in April and issue a notice to proceed shortly thereafter. With that project being completed in the late fall of 2023, which coincides with a lot of the experts that are looking at the hotel and hospitality industry recovery. And I'll touch more on that in just a moment. There's some renderings of the hotel in your packet. As I said, we've taken the time to refine a few things to make sure we keep that well within our total development budget. And these are some of the depictions associated with the hotel itself. On Andrew Young Pedestrian Mall, page 10, that project is going to start construction in April of this year. It will take us about a year and a half to complete it, and that's really a total remake of the entryway coming from area like Andrew Young International Boulevard to the location of the hotel. And you'll see some pictures and depictions of what some of the elements are on page 11 and page 12 of the packet of material. And again, nothing's really materially changed on that project. Still well within our budget and certainly our schedule when we started this whole process on that project or on that program. If you go to page 14, Transportation Depot, again, it's second phase of the overall remake of the facility. That project is looking to start construction April of this year with completion 1 year away into April of 2022. And I misspoke on the other slide. We'll be finished with the Andrew Young Pedestrian Mall by the end of the year, first part of 22. So this project is getting into the GMP pricing phase right now. And on page 15 and 16, you'll see some of the associated designs. But this is actually the Transportation Depot will sit between State Farm Arena and the International Plaza, which is the green space across the red deck. So that project is, again, within budget, and we're looking to, eagerly awaiting to start construction on that as well. We'll have a canopy covering over the drop-off areas for the buses, and then we're working through a connection back to the building that would keep passengers and customers undercover as they enter the facility at building, what we call Building D. The Orange Deck project has been completed. We're just in the final punch list phase of that, and came in at 544 spaces. And you'll see that photograph actually of the parking deck as it completed. That sets between Mercedes-Benz Stadium, our Building BC connector area, and the Home Depot backyard to the west of it. So it's a very direct access to off of Andrew Young International Boulevard, and additional parking for the events at the facility when we see events coming back. In FY22, what we've requested and what the governor's placed in his budget is really a phase 2 funding associated with roof adjustment. As I mentioned, we were very grateful for the $12 million that we received in the prior year. So that package with this, and most likely one additional ask, we're going to do the pricing phases associated with that. It will have all the roofs on the Congress Center totally replaced and updated. And just as a reminder, a lot of the roofs that we have there actually go back into the late 70s into the early 90s. So we're taking care of the most critical areas, and this will continue to march through that as we go forward. You'll see depictions of what we're talking about in terms of our priority on page 21. And so we're working through to get these done as quickly as we possibly can. And then again on page 22, a reflection of the different priorities of what we're talking about. So what about what's going on in the event world in our space? Last year, from mid-March to the end of the year, we had no major conventions, no meetings whatsoever. We were basically shut down for the most part. We were still open, but we did not have any events of any significance. So as you look into calendar 21, what we were seeing last fall was a change in perspectives, in particular as it relates to youth sports and consumer-oriented shows. So in November and December last year, we hosted two youth sports events, but smaller in scale, but definitely events that we could test and improve on our various public safety protocols. We are the first major convention center in the country that received what's called the Global Biorisk STAR venue certification, presented by the International Sanitary and Supply Association. We had worked with a number of individuals within that group and actually led the effort for our industry to create a template that other convention centers could pursue that certification. We were successful in achieving that last July. Since then, a number of convention centers, Hyatt hotels, American Airlines, have all pursued their what's called the GBAC STAR certification. So we were very pleased to do that. And it certainly has helped us in terms of our communication with customers. So if you look at what we'll see happening in this calendar year, it's really a tale of two cities. The first half of the year will be somewhat of a mixed bag. As I said, youth sports, consumer shows still seem to be the area that is most active right now. We've been able to work through those events very safely, working with our customers to ensure that their protocols are compliant with the governor's executive orders and CDC guidelines. We'll be hosting a cheer sport event this weekend. It's operating under very restrictive protocols, and we're anxious to see that event come into the facility. So through June of this year, somewhat of a mixed bag of events. As you get into July, to the balance of the calendar year, it's somewhat of a different story. Story that we see that a lot of our convention trade shows beginning to stabilize, come back into the marketplace, and certainly as we go into into calendar 22, that is continuing the same thematic. But we've got to work through this next 6 months, which is going to be a real dicey situation in many respects. If you turn to page 25, this will give you some idea of the events that we've rebooked into the facility for future years that canceled with us last year. And then a number of our annual conventions that we have, such as Poultry, International Woodworking, and others have also reconfirmed for their next rotation as they go out into the 22 and beyond. And then 26 really is a picture of those customers that are either annual or on vacation with us that we're very grateful are rebooking and coming back into the marketplace in the years to come. So, impact of COVID to us on a more direct basis on page 27. As I mentioned, since March of last year, we've lost 100 events, $50 million in lost revenue. In fiscal 20, we're on track in January, actually a year ago this month, where we were on track to make about $3.5 million. We actually ended the fiscal year with a loss of just about $4.3 million. As we prepared for fiscal 21, we budgeted a loss of $10 million. We furloughed or laid off over 100 employees. We started the last year at 325 staff members. We're down actually below 100 at this point in time. All of our active employees last year, the first half of the fiscal year, were required to take 12 furlough days. And so with the remaining team members, we're operating in what we call all hands mode. So every event that we do, we each have a job to each of us on, whether it be cleaning bathrooms, sweeping floors, picking trash cans, whatever, up to including myself and Lindsay. We on the volleyball event we had in mid-January, I cleaned bathrooms, as did Lindsay. But under that all-hands approach, it allows us to maximize the amount of revenue that we're able to generate from these events and do it safely in the facility. We're not in a position to bring back anybody at this point. And so going through at least the end of the fiscal year, we're going to be in that all-hands mode, and except for certain skill sets that we don't have available on staff, which we would have to bring in to help support, we'll be in that mode in the balance of this fiscal year. So how we've been operating since I got here in 2010, we've been able to swivel funds up to going into the pandemic time period. We've been able to put aside about $16 million that we saw as our rainy day fund, not knowing that we're going to be facing the hurricane, tornado, and everything else coming our way. So we're using that cash to support our operations. And did a number of things to mitigate expenses, which are reflected in page 30. So these are representative of the types of measures we take and have taken and will continue to take in order to manage the resources. But by the end of this fiscal year, we will be out of cash. And so we're faced with some very difficult decisions at that point, which really goes into one of our asks. I'll hasten to say we're grateful to the House and the Senate in providing $3 million of appropriations for us to help us sustain operations, and that's going to be a tremendous help as we look to rebuild going into fiscal 22. Our other ask is to supplement that with 5 in the fiscal 22 2022 budget. We're in a position now that the events that we see on the horizon will not be able to support those events absent bringing back staff members, which the 3 and 5 will certainly allow us to start getting people back on the payroll to support the events, but we'll not be able to go back totally to the size of organization that we were before. We think the financial resources that we would see associated with each appropriation plus the events, we think our organization will probably stabilize at about 175 to 180, which is a significant drop from where it was before. But we feel we have to be very cautious in terms of how we use our financial resources in order to support the events we have that generate income to help sustain operations. We don't like being in front of you asking for appropriation. We pride ourselves on operating in a self-sustaining mode. We only seek from capital funding, which are beyond our means to support. But that is where we're at in terms of our requests in our picture. See that in page 31 in fiscal 2021, this fiscal year right now, we're projecting for fiscal 21 to end the year about $9.3 million loss. So we will be at a point that I think at the end of June we'll have a little over $1 million in cash available to us, not counting the 3 and hopefully the 5. We're managing it as a very difficult situation that a lot of our colleagues in the industry, and we're going to operate as efficiently and as effectively as we possibly can, and be respectful of their generosity in supporting us, in not only with the supplemental budget, but hopefully with the FY22 budget. I think that's conclude my presentation, and certainly open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? No, I don't want to be the only one asking questions. Okay. Representative Jackson.
I missed it when you talked about the Henry Gone Boulevard. Did you say that the entrance from Marietta Street will be closed off?
No, it'll be divided into 2 pieces. One will be an extension of the pedestrian walkway coming out of Centennial Lincoln Park. The second half, which would be the southern half of it, would remain for traffic, both vehicular and buses. What our twofold objective was to extend the walkway coming out of the park up to the front door, relieve sort of traffic congestion there at Marietta and Andrew Young, in particular shuttle buses, and route shuttle buses up COP Drive, on Mercedes-Benz, transportation depot, and also shared routes, Uber, Lyft, et cetera, to utilize that. So that was our twofold objective in that project.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I have one question. In the breakdown of the $5 million, how much will be used for personnel and how much for operation? Do you have any idea?
It'll wind up being about 40% personnel related, 40, 45, and then the balance would be supplies, utilities, et cetera, to help support the operation. It's about 45% personnel.
Well, I tell you, I as a Georgia citizen appreciate what y'all are doing to try to stay afloat, and how everybody's really jumped in and trying to save the boat, I guess you say. But I live in town near Centennial Park, and it is just amazing to me how there's nobody around. And I think yesterday afternoon, about 6 o'clock, we were counting the people we can see out on the balcony. It was some 6 people. And it's nothing like it used to be. And I know we're all anxious for it to get back to normal. Did y'all apply for any CARES money?
Under the act, they made no provision for our industry type, so it's not.
Well,
Other than which we did receive.
Yeah.
50,000.
I just, you read the paper how they go to the concerts and all this sort of stuff, you can get money for it. I wonder, well, but thank you for any other questions.
We'll leave you on this. For future does look right. For the hospitality industry, it's not opportunity, but we're working through some disruption currently. But future is right.
Thank you. Thank you. Take a break. It's the IT people are gonna have to come in here and try to reboot for the people who are zooming in. If we could just sort of take a break for about 10 minutes, 5 minutes, a 5-minute break.